Hey guys, tonight we begin with the remarkable, filthy life of a man who rejected everything society held dear. Diogenes of Sinope, philosopher, vagrant, and professional social embarrassment, who somehow turned living in a barrel into one of history's most influential philosophical statements. The ancient Greek who urinated on people he disagreed with, masturbated in public markets, and still managed to become revered as one of the wisest men of his era. Let's just say surviving his lifestyle would break most of us by breakfast. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations, you've just woken up in ancient Athens, approximately 360 BCE. The good news is you're alive. The bad news is you're Diogenes, and your bed is a large ceramic storage jar that once held olive oil, but now holds you, along with whatever fleas, mites, and unidentifiable creatures have decided to call your matted beard home. Your jar, which later generations will romantically call a barrel, sits tilted on its side in the cranium, a gymnasium in Corinth where the wealthy exercise and socialize. You've positioned it there specifically to annoy them. The jar provides shelter, but that's about it. No pillow, no blanket, just hard, curved ceramic that's either too hot in summer or freezing in winter. The smell is distinctive. A powerful blend of unwashed human, stale wine, and possibly something that died nearby that you haven't bothered to remove. You open your eyes to the Grecian sunlight, already blazing through the open end of your jar. Athens is awake, noisy with merchants, philosophers, and citizens going about their day. You stretch, your joints popping loudly after another night on solid clay. At approximately age 60, your body protests every morning, every movement a symphony of aches. But you ignore it. Physical discomfort is trivial compared to the discomfort of living inauthentically. Perhaps most notably, you wake up completely naked. Clothing, like shame, is an unnecessary social construct in your philosophy. You own exactly one item, a rough woolen cloak that serves as your only concession to social norms when absolutely necessary, and even that you wear with reluctant contempt. Sometimes it's your blanket, sometimes it's your pillow. Most times it sits crumpled in the corner of your jar, as useless to you as money or political influence. Your stomach growls. You're hungry, but that's hardly new. Hunger is your constant companion, a feeling you've not only accepted but embraced. In your view, hunger, like all discomforts, is a teacher. It reminds you of exactly how little a human being actually needs to survive. You reach for your wooden bowl, the one possession besides your cloak that you occasionally admit to owning. It's cracked, stained, and as minimal as an object can be while still performing its function. You once threw even this away after watching a child drink water with cupped hands, shaming you for your unnecessary materialism. Before addressing your hunger, there's another pressing need. With complete nonchalance, you crawl from your jar and urinate against it, in full view of passing Athenians. Their disgust amuses you. Public urination isn't just a bodily function for you, it's a philosophical statement. Dogs urinate wherever they need to, and you've modeled your life after the simplicity and authenticity of dogs. It's why people call you Diogenes the dog. The wealthy Athenians walking by avert their eyes. Some shout insults. You smile. Their disapproval is confirmation you're living correctly. Your day hasn't even properly started, and you've already challenged social norms, rejected material comfort, and publicly demonstrated your disdain for arbitrary human rules. And this is just how your morning begins. The real philosophical provocations are still ahead. Most people wouldn't last an hour living as you do. But then, that's precisely the point. You hobble away from your jar home, your wooden bowl in hand, ready to face another day of voluntary poverty in the bustling streets of ancient Athens. Your beard is matted, your hair is wild, and your skin is deeply tanned and weathered from constant exposure to the elements. Despite your deliberately dishevelled appearance, there's an unmistakable intensity in your eyes, sharp, observant, and uncompromisingly direct. Hunger drives you toward the agora, Athens' central marketplace. You don't have money to buy food. You rejected all your wealth years ago when you abandoned your hometown of Sinope after a scandal involving defacing currency. The exact details of that scandal are murky even to historians, but some say you literally defaced coins, scratching out the imagery as a protest against corrupt values represented by money. Begging is your primary method of feeding yourself, though you prefer to call it asking humans for what they owe to other humans. You approach a bread vendor, bowl outstretched, and fix him with that unsettling stare you're famous for. Some merchants give you scraps just to make you go away. Others refuse, calling you a parasite. To them, you bark like a dog or offer philosophical insults that cut deeper than any blade. When I ask for food, you once famously proclaimed, "I'm not begging, I'm simply collecting a debt that society owes to philosophers." The bread vendor reluctantly tosses a stale crust into your bowl, muttering something about that filthy cynic. The label doesn't bother you, in fact, you embrace it. Cynic comes from the Greek word for dog-like, and you've worked hard to earn to one. Living simply, shamelessly, and with complete honesty is the core of your philosophy. You move through the marketplace, occasionally stopping to rummage through discarded food in the gutters. Nothing is beneath you. Pride is for fools pretending they're not animals. You find half an onion, a fish head someone has thrown away, and add them to your bread crust. A feast by your standards. As you eat standing in the middle of the busy agora, you observe the Athenians rushing about their day. They hurry from vendor to vendor, haggling over olives and fish and pottery, accumulating possessions you consider not just unnecessary but spiritually harmful. You see slaves carrying heavy loads for wealthy citizens, merchants counting coins, women shopping for expensive fabrics. All of them trapped in a web of social obligations and artificial desires. "Look at these people," you mutter to no one in particular, surrendering their freedom for trinkets. Your breakfast finished, you wipe your hands on your beard, another habit that disgusts onlookers. Your hygiene is deliberately provocative. Why waste time washing when that time could be spent challenging social norms and seeking wisdom? Water is for drinking, not vanity. Besides, your body odor creates a convenient empty space around you in the crowded marketplace. Personal space is a luxury in packed ancient Athens. A group of well-dressed young men passes by, students of Plato's academy, judging by their pretentious conversation about abstract forms and the nature of justice. You follow them, heckling. When Plato defined humans as featherless bipeds, I plucked a chicken and brought it to his lecture, shouting, "Behold, a human." The story is one of your favourites to tell, though the students have heard it before. They try to ignore you, but you're persistent. You position yourself directly in their path, blocking their way. Tell me, you demand of the most elegantly dressed student, what use is your philosophy if it doesn't free you from conventional desires? You claim to seek wisdom while wearing gold rings and fretting about your reputation. The student attempts to engage, saying something about the need for social order and the benefits of moderation, rather than your extreme asceticism. You respond by breaking wind loudly, your preferred counter-argument to intellectual posturing. For you, philosophy isn't about clever words or abstract theories. It's about action, about living in accordance with nature and reason rather than social convention. You demonstrate your ideas through your lifestyle and provocative public behavior. Why write treatises when you can turn your entire life into a walking, breathing critique of society? As the students hurry away from your offensive display, You notice a wealthy merchant nearby has stopped to stare disapprovingly. You meet his gaze, then defiantly begin to masturbate, right there in the marketplace. Public self-pleasure is another of your philosophical statements. If an act is natural, why should it be hidden? Why should natural human functions be shameful when they're simply part of being an animal? The merchant hurries away in disgust, and you grin triumphantly. Another small victory against artificial social norms, and your day has barely begun. By midday, the Athenian sun beats down mercilessly, and the agora buzzes with activity. For most people, this would be time for a siesta. But for you, Diogenes, it's prime time for philosophical provocation. The more people around, the larger your audience. You decide to position yourself at the intersection of two busy thoroughfares, sitting cross-legged in the dirt. From a distance, it might almost look like meditation, but what you're really doing is observing, studying the human zoo around you with the keen eye of a naturalist examining particularly deluded specimens. A group of politicians passes by, identifiable by their fine robes and the attendants trailing behind them. They're discussing the upcoming assembly vote, trading favours and plotting strategies. To you, they might as well be discussing which imaginary creature is most beautiful. Politics, in your view, is the art of creating elaborate solutions to problems that wouldn't exist in a natural state. Which is the greater criminal? You call out to them loudly. The thief who steals from the rich, or the politician who steals from everyone through taxes? They pretend not to hear you, but their quickened pace betrays their discomfort. You're known throughout Athens for your biting commentary, and few public figures escape your ridicule. Even Alexander the Great was famously put in his place by you, when the world's most powerful man asked what he could do for you. You simply replied, "Stand out of my sunlight." Speaking of sunlight, you have a particular practice for midday. You light a lamp, yes, in broad daylight, and walk through the crowded marketplace holding it up to people's faces, peering intently at them. "What are you doing, Diogenes?" someone inevitably asks. "I'm looking for an honest man," you reply, "but I've yet to find one." The lamp in daylight has become one of your signature provocations, a living metaphor for the darkness of human dishonesty that persists even in the supposed enlightenment of Athenian civilization. As you continue your lamp-bearing journey, you pass the temple of Dionysus, where a religious festival is beginning. Priests in ceremonial garb sacrifice a goat while muttering prayers, wealthy citizens make lavish offerings, and the air fills with incense. You observe this with particular disdain. To you, organized religion is perhaps the most absurd of all human inventions, humans creating elaborate rituals to please gods they've invented, then pretending those same gods demand specific behaviors. You've been known to mock religious practitioners by performing exaggerated parodies of their rituals, making animal noises during solemn ceremonies, or pointing out the logical contradictions in their myths. If the gods are as petty and jealous as your stories claim, you once shouted during a similar festival, "They don't deserve worship." And if they're truly wise and benevolent, they wouldn't want it. Today, however, you restrain yourself from disrupting the ceremony directly, not out of respect, but because you've spotted a more interesting target, a group of young aristocrats betting on a cockfight in a small side alley. You approach them, still holding your lit lamp despite the blazing sun overhead. They eye you warily, your reputation precedes you. "Ah," you exclaim loudly. "Here we see men behaving like the animals they claim to be superior to." The young men shift uncomfortably. One of them, braver or perhaps more foolish than the rest, steps forward. "What business is it of yours, dog?" he demands, using your nickname as an insult. "At least we don't live in filth like you." You smile, revealing stained teeth. "I live in filth on the outside where it can be washed away." You keep your filth inside, where it corrupts your character. The young man reaches for his dagger, but his friends hold him back, warning him that attacking you would only bring shame. You're protected not by law or status, but by your very worthlessness in conventional terms. There's no honor in harming you, and considerable dishonor in being emotionally provoked by a beggar philosopher. As they drag their angry friend away, abandoning their cockfight, you consider this another victory. By simply existing as you do, you've disrupted their mindless entertainment, and perhaps planted a seed of self-reflection. You extinguish your lamp, no point wasting oil, and continue your midday wanderings. Your stomach growls again, but you ignore it. Hunger is just another sensation, neither good nor bad in itself. Your voluntary poverty isn't about suffering, but about freedom. By needing almost nothing, you've made yourself immune to most threats and manipulations. Threaten a man who needs nothing, you often say, and you'll discover the limits of your power. The afternoon brings a change of scenery. You decide to wander from the marketplace toward the outskirts of the city, where Athens transitions into countryside. Your pace is unhurried, almost meandering. Unlike most Athenians rushing to appointments, transactions, and social obligations, you have nowhere to be. Freedom from scheduling is another luxury of your ascetic lifestyle. Along the path you pass grand houses with high walls. Behind these barriers live Athens' elite, politicians, wealthy merchants, famous artists. These walls don't just provide security, they create separation. The rich seal themselves away from the poor, the clean from the dirty, the socially acceptable from the undesirable. Like you approach one particularly ostentatious mansion and find its bronze gates open as servants carry in supplies. Without hesitation, you stroll in as if invited. A startled servant tries to block your path. "This is the home of Aristocles, the prominent merchant," he sputters. "You can't just walk in." You fix him with your penetrating stare. "I'm simply admiring the man's prison," you reply. Such beautiful bars he's installed to keep himself trapped. The commotion attracts the owner himself, a corpulent man draped in expensive purple-dyed fabric, fingers heavy with gold rings. He recognizes you immediately. Your reputation ensures that most prominent Athenians know your face, even if they wish they didn't. "Diogenes," he sighs with feigned tolerance. "To what do I owe this visitation?" "I heard you collected beautiful things," you reply, gesturing to the marble statues and painted vases visible in the courtyard. "I came to see what a man would trade his freedom for." The merchant's face tightens, but he maintains his composure. Many wealthy Athenians fancy themselves philosophers or patrons of intellectual discourse. To lose his temper would be to lose face. "You consider my possessions a burden rather than a blessing?" he asks, attempting to engage philosophically. "I consider them a disease," you reply bluntly. "Each one a symptom of your fear of living truthfully." You wander past him, examining his possessions with exaggerated indifference. At a table laden with exotic fruits, imports from Persia and Egypt, that cost more than a labourer earns in a month, you casually grab an apple and bite into it noisily. The merchant watches, caught between outrage at your trespass and the social awkwardness of confronting Athens' most famous philosophical provocateur. You don't just break social norms, you shatter them with premeditated precision, forcing others to either engage with your philosophical challenge or reveal themselves as slaves to convention by ejecting you. "At least I don't beg for my food," the merchant finally says, his composure cracking. You grin, apple juice dripping into your beard. "I don't beg from need, but you buy from emptiness." Which of us is truly impoverished? Before he can respond, you toss the apple core onto his immaculate mosaic floor and saunter back toward the gate, having delivered your philosophical critique through action rather than mere words. This is how you typically spend your afternoons, transforming yourself into a walking philosophical argument against excess and artificiality. While Plato writes about ideal republics and Aristotle catalogues knowledge, you embody your philosophy through confrontational performance. Making your way back toward the city centre, you pass one of Athens' many busy workshops. Inside, slaves and craftsmen labour over pottery, metalwork, and woodcraft. The rhythmic sound of hammers and the heat of kilns spill into the street. You pause to observe, particularly interested in the enslaved workers. You yourself were allegedly once captured by pirates and sold into slavery. When asked what skills you possessed at the slave market, you reportedly answered, governing men, and demanded to be purchased by someone who needed a master. This typical Diogenic response supposedly impressed a wealthy Corinthian named Cynic, who bought you and entrusted you with teaching his children. Whether this story is historical truth or philosophical legend, your views on slavery are complex. You reject the conventional distinction between slave and free, seeing most free citizens as enslaved to social conventions, material desires, and fear of disapproval, chains more binding than any iron shackles. To the workers who notice you watching, you call out, some of you are owned by masters, others by your possessions. I see no free men here. A burly supervisor emerges from the workshop, wiping sweat from his brow. Move along, Cynic. We have work to do, unlike some. Work. You scoff. Is that what you call this elaborate distraction from living? The man spits at your feet and returns to his tasks. You've planted the seed of discomfort, which is all you can hope for. Philosophy, as you practice it, isn't about winning arguments but about disturbing comfortable assumptions. As afternoon begins to fade toward evening, you make your way back toward your barrel at the cranium. Your stomach growls fiercely now. You've had nothing since that meagre breakfast, but you wear your hunger like a badge of honor. Self-mastery through voluntary hardship is central to your philosophy. As evening approaches, you return to the area near your barrel home. The cranium, with its athletic fields and covered walkways, begins to empty of the wealthy citizens who use it for exercise and socializing. A few glance your way with undisguised contempt as they depart in their finery, returning to comfortable homes and prepared meals. You're filthy from your day's wanderings, your feet caked with the dust of Athens streets, your beard containing traces of the apple you stole and whatever else you managed to scavenge throughout the day. Your naked body bears the marks of your hard living, scars, sunburn, insect bites, and a general weathering that makes you look older than your years. Rather than heading directly to your barrel, you make your way to a public fountain. Water is one of the few resources you allow yourself to use freely. You cup your hands and drink deeply, then splash water over your face and body, not out of concern for hygiene, but simply for the relief it brings after a hot day. A few passers-by avert their eyes from your naked bathing. Public nudity isn't uncommon in Athens. The gymnasium's athletes train naked, after all. But there's a difference between the sculpted bodies of young athletes and your aging, unkempt form deliberately displayed as a challenge to aesthetic sensibilities. As you shake yourself dry dog-like, you notice a small gathering near one of the covered walkways. A visiting philosopher from another city-state appears to be holding an impromptu lecture. Curious, you approach, water still dripping from your beard. The philosopher, dressed in clean, modest robes that mark him as a serious thinker, but not an ostentatious sophist, is discussing the nature of happiness. His small audience listens attentively as he explains how prosperity, good reputation, and moderation lead to a satisfying life. You listen for a few moments, your face contorting with increasing skepticism. Finally, unable to contain yourself, you burst into the circle. Happiness requires nothing but freedom, you interrupt loudly, and even the lowest beggar can have that. The philosopher pauses, recognizing you. Rather than showing irritation at your interruption, he appears almost pleased, debating with the infamous Diogenes would make for a memorable session for his audience. Ah, Diogenes of Sinope acknowledges with forced cordiality. I was just explaining that while extreme wealth isn't necessary for happiness, a certain level of comfort and security surely is. Even you must admit that your life of voluntary hardship is not what most would consider happy. You laugh, a harsh barking sound. I've freed myself from the prison you're selling them, you gesture to the small crowd. You offer happiness through acquisition and moderation of desires. I offer freedom through elimination of desires. But surely some desires are natural and good, the philosopher counters. The desire for friendship, for health, for basic sustenance. Natural, yes. Necessary, perhaps. But good, that's where you start building chains, you reply. Once you teach them that some desires deserve pursuit, you've opened the door to endless wanting. The visiting philosopher smiles indulgently. Yet you yourself desire to spread your philosophy, do you not? You desire to challenge our thinking. Are these not worthy desires? You scratch your beard thoughtfully, unintentionally dislodging a small insect that had been living there. I desire nothing but to live according to nature. If nature gave me the temperament to bark at fools, so be it. The crowd chuckles nervously, caught between entertainment and discomfort. The exchange continues for a while, with the visiting philosopher attempting to engage in structured debate, while you respond with your characteristic mix of biting wit, crude analogies, and physical demonstrations. When the philosopher begins explaining his complex theory of balancing bodily and intellectual pleasures, you simply break wind loudly, then declare, "There, I've shortened your lecture on pleasure and release. Where's my fee?" The gathering eventually breaks up, some laughing, others offended. The visiting philosopher seems both irritated and thoughtfully challenged, exactly the effect you aim for. As darkness falls over Athens, you finally return to your barrel in the cranium. A small dog, an actual canine, not a philosophical one, has taken up residence near your home. You don't shoo it away. In fact, you break off a small piece of bread crust that you'd been saving and offer it to the animal. "Here, fellow cynic," you murmur. "At least you never pretend to be anything but what you are." The dog takes the morsel and settles beside your barrel. You crawl inside your ceramic home, positioning yourself as comfortably as possible on the hard surface. The night air is cooling rapidly, and you pull your threadbare cloak around you. Not out of modesty, there's no one to see you now, but for the minimal warmth it provides. You've eaten barely enough to keep a bird alive today, you've walked miles on bare feet, you've been insulted, ignored, and grudgingly tolerated. Yet as you lie in your barrel, looking up at the emerging stars, you feel something that eludes many of Athens' wealthiest citizens, contentment. By embracing physical hardship, you've liberated yourself from the tyranny of comfort. By rejecting social status, you've freed yourself from the prison of reputation. Tomorrow will bring more hunger, more provocation, more philosophical confrontation. But tonight, in your barrel under the Athenian stars, you are perhaps the freest man in the ancient world. Dawn breaks over Athens, and you wake with a jolt. Something is wrong. Your barrel, normally positioned at the edge of the cranium, has been moved in the night. You find yourself rolling precariously as a group of young aristocrats, probably drunk from a night of revelling, push your ceramic home like a child's toy, laughing as they do so. Look at the dogs spin. One of them cackles as your barrel picks up speed down a slight incline. For a man of your age, possibly in your 60s, though you've never kept precise track, this is no minor prank. The barrel hits a rock and tips, spilling you onto the hard-packed dirt. Pain shoots through your shoulder and hip as you land ungracefully, completely naked and exposed. The young men laugh uproariously. In their expensive clothing, with their perfumed hair and soft hands that have never known labour, they represent everything your philosophy stands against: privilege, excess, cruelty masquerading as humour. You stand slowly, dignity intact, despite your nakedness and the fresh scrapes on your skin. Rather than shouting or threatening, you simply stare at them, that penetrating Diogenic gaze that has unnerved even kings. "Are you not ashamed," you ask quietly, "to find amusement in cruelty?" One youth, braver than the rest, steps forward. "It's just a joke, old man." "Can't dogs take jokes?" You smile, but there's no warmth in it. "I am indeed a dog," you reply, "which is why I lift my leg on things I despise." With that, you proceed to urinate directly onto the young man's expensive sandals. The shock on his face is priceless. His companions, who seconds ago were laughing at your humiliation, now fall silent. "Dogs also bite," you add calmly. The threat, or perhaps the sheer audacity of your response, ends their amusement. They back away, muttering curses and insults, but clearly unwilling to escalate the confrontation further. Even in Athens, assaulting a well-known philosopher, however unconventional, would bring social consequences they're unwilling to face. Once they've gone, you examine your barrel. It's dented but intact. With considerable effort, you roll it back to its usual place at the edge of the cranium. Your few possessions, the wooden bowl, your cloak, are scattered. You retrieve them silently. This wasn't the first time you've been targeted for your lifestyle, and it won't be the last. By positioning yourself as a living critique of Athenian society, you've made yourself a target. The physical discomfort of being thrown from your barrel is nothing compared to the satisfaction of knowing your mere existence is disruptive enough to provoke such reactions. As you settle your home back into position, a few early morning exercises at the cranium witness your efforts. None offer to help. Some look away in embarrassment, others in disgust. One older man, a regular at the gymnasium whom you've seen before, approaches hesitantly. "Diogenes," he says, "I saw what those young men did. Disgraceful behavior. Are you injured?" You eye him suspiciously. Sympathy is unfamiliar territory for you. After a moment you reply, "Only my expectations of humanity, and those were injured long ago." The man shifts uncomfortably. "I could speak to their fathers. I recognize the family crests on their rings." You laugh, a genuine sound this time. And what would that accomplish? Teaching them that consequences only come through connections and social standing. No, they've learned the only lesson I care to teach, that dignity isn't determined by circumstance. The man nods slowly, perhaps seeing wisdom in your response, perhaps simply eager to end the uncomfortable conversation. He moves on to continue his morning exercise, leaving you once again alone with your dented barrel and bruised body. This is the reality of your chosen path. Your voluntary poverty isn't romantic or glamorous. It's dangerous, painful, and isolating. Yet you remain convinced it's the only honest way to live in a dishonest world. As Plato's featherless piped, you've plucked yourself bare of all social protections and conventions, exposing the raw, unapologetic human beneath. You inspect your few possessions to ensure nothing is broken beyond use. Your wooden bowl has a new crack running along its side, but it will still hold water. Your cloak is muddied but intact. The stray dog that befriended you the previous evening has disappeared, perhaps frightened by the commotion. In your philosophy, possessions are burdens that tie one to false values and unnecessary concerns. However, even you acknowledge the practical necessity of these minimal items. The wooden bowl allows you to drink and collect food without using your hands like a complete animal. The cloak provides essential warmth on cold nights. To reject these entirely would be to commit slow suicide, which is not your goal. Your asceticism is about stripping away the unnecessary, not embracing death. As the sun climbs higher, you flex your sore limbs and prepare to face another day of voluntary hardship and philosophical provocation. The bruises will heal. The lesson, both for those young men and for anyone who witnessed the encounter, will linger much longer. By mid-morning, you've made your way to a small public garden where a group of scholars has gathered for an informal philosophical discussion. Athens is a city obsessed with ideas, and such gatherings happen daily throughout the city. As you approach, you recognize several followers of Plato engaged in earnest debate about the nature of virtue. Despite your frequent mockery of Plato's abstractions, you find these discussions useful, not for the wisdom they contain, but for the opportunities they provide to challenge conventional thinking. The discussion pauses as you enter the garden. Your reputation precedes you, and several of the younger scholars exchange nervous glances. Your philosophical methods are, after all, more confrontational than contemplative. "Ah, Diogenes," says one older scholar with the resigned tone of someone who has endured your interruptions before, "have you come to enlighten us with your unique perspective on virtue?" You scratch your matted beard thoughtfully. "I've come to watch humans pretend that virtue is complicated," you reply. Despite your confrontational nature, you're not unwelcome in these gatherings. Athenian intellectual life thrives on disagreement, and even those who find your methods distasteful recognize the value of your challenges. Besides, philosophical discussions that can survive your scathing critiques emerge stronger. "We were discussing whether virtue can be taught," offers a younger scholar, perhaps hoping to engage you in the actual topic rather than meta-criticism. You snort derisively. Teaching virtue through words is like teaching hunger through pictures of food. "Then how is virtue acquired, in your view?" asks another, genuinely curious. "By doing virtuous things," you reply simply. "Not by talking about them in gardens while slaves prepare your meals." This pointed reference to the scholar's comfortable lifestyle creates an uncomfortable silence. Many of Athens' intellectual elite espouse theories about justice, virtue, and the good life while maintaining households full of slaves and enjoying privileges denied to most citizens, let alone women, foreigners, or the poor. One scholar, more irritated than the others, interjects, "Easy for you to say, Diogenes. You've abandoned all social responsibility. You contribute nothing to the city, pay no taxes, hold no office, defend no borders. Your freedom is parasitic on the very society you criticize." You smile, revealing your stained teeth. Does a gadfly contribute to a horse? No, but it keeps the horse from growing lazy and complacent. "I am Athens' gadfly, and you should thank me for the service." This reference to Socrates, who famously compared himself to a gadfly stinging the horse of Athens into philosophical awareness, isn't lost on the gathered scholars. Though your methods differ dramatically from the more genteel questioning practiced by Socrates, you see yourself as continuing his tradition of disruptive critique. The conversation continues, with you challenging every abstraction and theoretical construct proposed by the Platonists. When they speak of the form of the good, you ask if it can be eaten. When they discuss the immortality of the soul, you break wind and ask if that too is immortal. Your philosophical method is deliberately corporeal, bringing abstract discussions back to the physical realities that intellectuals often ignore. Eventually the group disbands, some annoyed, others thoughtful, all affected in some way by your provocations. As they return to their comfortable homes and prepared meals, you consider your intervention a success, not because you've convinced them of anything, but because you've made their certainties a little less certain. You decide to move on to the agora, Athens' bustling marketplace, where different philosophical game awaits. While the garden scholars represent intellectual abstraction, the marketplace embodies materialism and status-seeking, another set of conventional values ripe for disruption. The agora is crowded this time of day, with merchants hawking everything from fresh fish to imported silks. Citizens of all classes mingle, though the social hierarchies remain visible in clothing, mannerisms, and who gives way to whom on the narrow paths between stalls. You wander through, occasionally picking up items and examining them with exaggerated confusion, as if you cannot fathom why anyone would want such things. At a jeweller's stall, you hold up an ornate gold necklace. How strange, you announce loudly, to create heavy chains and call them valuable. The merchant quickly reclaims his merchandise, giving you a sour look but saying nothing. Like most Athenians, he He knows engaging with you directly often ends in public humiliation. At a pottery stand, you examine expensive decorated vessels not unlike your own barrel home, but painted with mythological scenes and coated with glaze. Look at these, you proclaim to no one in particular. Humans make thousands of these to store wine and oil, but when one man chooses to live in one, they call him mad. Your stomach growls loudly, reminding you that philosophical provocations, however satisfying, don't provide nourishment. You haven't eaten since yesterday's meagre findings. While your ascetic philosophy embraces hunger as a teacher, even you acknowledge the need for occasional sustenance. You approach a bread seller's stall, wooden bowl in hand. The vendor, a stout woman who has encountered you before, sighs deeply. "Back again, philosopher?" she asks, not unkindly. "What wisdom will you trade for bread today?" Unlike many Athenians, she seems to find your antics more amusing than offensive. Perhaps the daily struggle of making a living has given her a perspective more aligned with your criticism of excesses and pretension. The wise man knows that giving bread to a hungry philosopher brings more satisfaction than selling it to a wealthy fool. You reply, holding out your cracked bowl. She laughs, breaking off a piece of fresh bread and dropping it into your bowl. And does the wise man know that flattery is just another form of deception? You grin appreciatively. The wise woman certainly does. This is a rare moment of genuine connection in your deliberately isolated existence. Though you reject conventional social bonds, you aren't entirely misanthropic. Your quarrel is with artifice and hypocrisy, not with humanity itself. As midday approaches, the Athenian sun beats down mercilessly. The stone streets and buildings reflect heat back at street level, creating a shimmering haze that seems to distort reality itself. Most wealthy citizens retreat to their homes for the afternoon, resting in the shade until the worst of the heat passes. Slaves are less fortunate, continuing their labors despite the punishing temperature. You, however, have your own peculiar response to the heat. According to some accounts, you've been seen hugging frozen statues in winter to demonstrate your mastery over physical discomfort. In summer, you take the opposite approach, deliberately sitting in the full sun while others seek shade. Today is no exception. You position yourself on a stone bench in a small public square, fully exposed to the midday sun. Your skin, already leathery from years of exposure to the elements, darkens further as sweat beads on your brow and chest. To passers-by, it looks like madness or self-torture, but to you, it's philosophical training. Voluntary hardship, what later Stoic philosophers will call ascesis, is central to your cynical philosophy. By deliberately embracing discomfort, you train yourself to overcome the fear of it. The man who can sit contentedly in burning heat or freezing cold, who can find satisfaction in hunger and peace in social rejection, has liberated himself from the levers that control most human behavior. A wealthy merchant passes by, carried in a litter by 4 slaves. A canopy shields him from the sun, and a servant walks alongside, fanning him with a large palm leaf. The contrast between his cultivated comfort and your deliberate discomfort couldn't be more stark. You call out to him, "See how much freedom your wealth has cost you. 4 men must suffer so you can avoid what I enjoy freely." The merchant pretends not to hear you, but orders his bearers to quicken their pace. This too you count as a small victory. Discomfort is more easily avoided than confronted, which is precisely why you choose to confront it directly. As you sit baking in the heat, a small group of young men approaches. Unlike the aristocrats who rolled your barrel this morning, these appear to be students, perhaps from Plato's academy or followers of some other philosophical school. They stop a respectful distance away, clearly interested but hesitant. Finally, one steps forward. "Are you Diogenes the Cynic?" You squint up at him, the sun creating a halo effect around his silhouette. "I am Diogenes," you reply. "Whether I am a cynic depends on whether you mean by that a dog philosopher or simply someone who sees the world clearly." We've heard many stories about you, another says. Is it true you once met Alexander the Great? The encounter with Alexander is perhaps your most famous philosophical moment, or at least the one most repeated in popular accounts. You decide to indulge them with the story, partly because it effectively illustrates your philosophy, and partly because everyone enjoys a tale of a common man standing up to the most powerful ruler in the world. I was lying here, much as I am now, enjoying the sun, you begin, when a shadow fell across me. Looking up, I saw a young man surrounded by soldiers and attendants. This, I was told, was Alexander of Macedon, conqueror of Greece and much of the known world. The students listen intently as you continue. Alexander looked down at me and declared, "I am Alexander the Great." I replied simply, "I am Diogenes the Cynic." The mighty king then asked if there was anything he could do for me, any gift or favour I desired from the most powerful man alive. You pause for dramatic effect, noting with satisfaction that the students are completely engrossed in your tale. I looked at the young conqueror and said only this, "Yes, stand aside. You're blocking my sunlight." The students exchanged glances, clearly impressed by your audacity. The story, whether strictly true or enhanced through retelling, perfectly captures your philosophy. Even the most powerful ruler in the world has no power over a man who desires nothing. What did Alexander do? One student asks eagerly. He laughed, you reply, and told his companions, "If I were not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes." He recognized what few understand, that my freedom is more complete than his power. What you don't add is that you supposedly responded, "And if I were not Diogenes, I too would wish to be Diogenes." The self-satisfaction might seem excessive, even for you. "But don't you fear death?" another student asks. Alexander commands armies. He could have had you killed for such insolence. You shrug, unconcerned. The man who has learned to need nothing has also learned not to fear death. When you stop measuring life by its length and start measuring it by its freedom, death becomes merely another natural process, no more frightening than sleep. The students continue questioning you about your philosophy, your lifestyle, and your provocative methods. Unlike the formal debates with established philosophers, these interactions are less confrontational. Though you maintain your characteristic bluntness, you recognize the value of shaping young minds not yet fully indoctrinated into social conventions. As the conversation continues, you remain seated in the full sun, sweat now streaming down your body. The students, despite their intellectual interest, eventually retreat to the shade of a nearby olive tree. Philosophy is one thing, heatstroke is another. You note this with silent amusement, another small demonstration of the gap between intellectual understanding and embodied philosophy. As afternoon progresses, you decide to visit one of Athens' many temples, not out of religious devotion, but because temples provide rich opportunities for philosophical provocations. Religious practices, with their elaborate rituals and unexamined assumptions, are particularly vulnerable to your style of critique. You make your way to a temple of Apollo, where a ceremony is underway. Priests in ceremonial robes burn offerings on an altar while worshippers look on with solemn reverence. The air is thick with incense, and the marble columns gleam in the afternoon sun. You position yourself at the edge of the gathering, observing with undisguised skepticism. When a priest sprinkles purifying water on supplicants seeking the god's favour, you call out loudly, "If water could purify moral imperfections, how sacred every fish would be." The ceremony falters momentarily as heads turn toward you. The priest, accustomed to maintaining decorum, attempts to continue, but you're not finished. When he begins a prayer asking Apollo for health and prosperity, you interrupt again. If Apollo is all-knowing, why tell him what you want? If he is good, won't he give it without asking? And if neither, why pray at all? This directness causes more disruption. A temple attendant approaches you, speaking in a harsh whisper. "Diogenes, this is a sacred ceremony. If you cannot show respect, you must leave. You raise your eyebrows in exaggerated surprise. I'm seeking truth in a house of truth. Is that not respectful? Your questions mock the gods, the attendant insists. If the gods can create worlds, surely they can withstand questions. You reply loudly enough for nearby worshippers to hear. Or are your gods as fragile as your ceremonies? The disruption has now become significant enough that the ceremony cannot continue smoothly. Some worshippers appear angry, others uncomfortable, and a few, particularly younger attendees, seem thoughtful or even amused. Before the situation escalates further, you decide to leave of your own accord. Making a philosophical point is your goal. Being dragged from the temple by force would shift the focus from your message to the conflict itself. You've planted seeds of doubt and critical thinking, which is all you can hope to accomplish. As you exit the temple grounds, you notice a young woman following you. When you stop at a public fountain to drink, she approaches. "Those were interesting questions you asked," she says. She's well dressed, but not ostentatiously so. Perhaps the daughter of a merchant or minor official. You eye her suspiciously. Women rarely engage with philosophers in public, as Athenian social norms strongly discourage such interactions. Truth doesn't care whether the ears that hear it belong to men or women, you reply, giving her an opening to continue if she wishes. "I've attended ceremonies my entire life," she says quietly, glancing around to ensure no one is listening too closely. "I've never understood why the gods need so much flattery if they're truly divine. Your questions, they make sense to me." This is an unexpected moment of connection. Though you reject conventional social bonds and expectations, you never aim to be entirely alone in your philosophical journey. The Cynic tradition would eventually include women like Hipparchia, though that will come after your time. The gods may exist, you tell her, but the gods that demand temples, sacrifices, and fearful obedience are creations of men seeking power over other men and women. She nods thoughtfully. Yet speaking such thoughts aloud can be dangerous, especially for a woman. "Truth is always dangerous," you reply. That's how you recognize it. Comfortable ideas rarely challenge power. A male voice calls out, perhaps a father or brother looking for her. She glances nervously in that direction. "I must go," she says, "but thank you for your courage." She hurries away, leaving you with a rare feeling of genuine connection. While your philosophical provocations often alienate people, they sometimes create unexpected bridges. Every mind freed from unexamined convention is a small victory. The sun has begun its descent toward the western horizon, and your stomach reminds you that you've had nothing but that small piece of bread since yesterday. You've trained yourself to embrace hunger, but even the most ascetic philosopher requires some sustenance. You make your way toward an area of the city where food vendors are cleaning up after the day's business. It's a good time to scavenge. Merchants often discard food that won't keep until tomorrow, and some might give away leftovers rather than throw them out. At a fish seller's stall, you find the merchant cleaning his workspace, tossing unwanted fish parts into a waste bucket. You approach, bowl in hand. "Those scraps you're throwing away," you say, pointing to the bucket. "May I have them?" The merchant looks at you with a mixture of pity and disgust. You want fish heads and entrails. "That's not food, philosopher." Even dogs would hesitate. "Yet you were going to give them to the earth," you reply. "Am I less deserving than dirt?" He shrugs and gestures to the bucket. "Take what you want. But don't get sick and blame me." You select several fish heads and place them in your bowl. To the merchant's visible disgust, you begin eating one raw, tearing at it with your teeth. "By the gods, man," he exclaims. "At least cook it first." You pause, fish oil dripping into your beard. Does a lion cook its prey? Does a wolf build a kitchen? I eat as nature intended. The truth is more practical than philosophical. You have no means to cook, and hunger doesn't allow for culinary refinement. But transforming necessity into philosophical choice is part of your method. By embracing what others consider degrading, you demonstrate that dignity doesn't depend on external circumstances. The merchant shakes his head and returns to his cleaning, muttering about madmen and philosophers as if they're interchangeable categories. You continue your meal, undeterred by his judgment or the stares of passers-by. Evening approaches, casting long shadows across Athens. The agora empties as merchants pack away their wares and citizens return to their homes for the evening meal. The rhythms of the city shift. Daytime commerce gives way to social gatherings, private meals, and for some, entertainment at symposia where wine flows freely and discussions range from politics to poetry. You, however, participate in none of these conventional evening activities. With your belly somewhat satisfied by the scavenged fish heads, you wander toward the outskirts of the city, where the urban landscape gradually blends into countryside. This transitional zone holds a particular appeal for you. It represents the boundary between civilization and nature, between the artificial constructs of human society and the unvarnished reality of the natural world. Your cynical philosophy positions itself at precisely this junction, recognizing humanity's animal nature while using reason to critique the unnecessary complications humans have added to existence. As twilight deepens, you find a small hill overlooking both the city and the surrounding countryside. From this vantage point, you can see Athens transitioning from day to night. Lamps are lit in homes and public spaces, creating constellations of human-made stars that mirror the real ones beginning to appear in the darkening sky above. You settle on the ground, wrapping your threadbare cloak around your shoulders against the evening chill. This is one of your rare moments of quiet contemplation, free from the performative provocations that define your public persona. The view prompts philosophical reflection. Athens, with its complex web of social hierarchies, political structures, and cultural institutions, appears from this distance as a fragile, temporary arrangement, an elaborate game that humans have convinced themselves is essential and eternal. Beyond the city, the unchanging hills and plains continue as they have for millennia, indifferent to human concerns. Your thoughts are interrupted by approaching footsteps. You turn to see a solitary figure making his way up the hill, a man in his middle years, dressed simply but not poorly. Not a wealthy aristocrat, but certainly not destitute either. Perhaps a craftsman or a merchant of modest means. He notices you and hesitates, clearly recognizing you but uncertain whether to proceed or respect your solitude. After a moment's consideration, he approaches. Diogenes, he greets you with a respectful nod. I didn't expect to find you here. You eye him warily. Did you expect to find me anywhere in particular? He smiles slightly. I suppose not. You're not known for predictability. An awkward silence follows. You make no effort to ease it. Social discomfort, like all discomfort, is something people should learn to endure rather than avoid through meaningless pleasantries. I often come here in the evenings, the man finally continues. To think, to escape the noise of the city for a while. To escape what you've helped create, you observe. He considers this, then nods slowly. Perhaps you're right. We build cities, then build hills to escape them. This unexpected philosophical insight from an ordinary Athenian intrigues you. Most citizens react to your provocations with offense or dismissal. Thoughtful engagement is rare. May I sit? He asks. Or do you prefer solitude? You gesture to the ground beside you. The hill belongs to no one. Sit if you wish. He lowers himself to the ground with a slight grimace that suggests the physical discomfort is unusual for him. For several minutes you sit in silence, watching the city below transition into night. I saw you in the agora today, he eventually says, speaking to the jeweler about his chains. You grunt non-committally. It made me think about my own work, he continues. I'm a carpenter. I build furniture for wealthy homes, beds with ornate carvings, tables inlaid with ivory, chairs designed more for display than comfort. You build discomfort disguised as luxury, you summarize. He laughs softly. I've never thought of it that way, but yes. And I charge more for it because the discomfort looks impressive to visitors. This conversation has taken an unexpected turn. You're accustomed to delivering provocations, not having your philosophy reflected back to you by a craftsman. Why build what you know to be false? You ask, genuinely curious. He sighs. I have a family. Children to feed, a daughter's dowry to save for. The wealthy pay well for beautiful discomfort. You nod, understanding the practical constraints that bind most people to conventional life. Your radical rejection of social norms and material comforts is possible partly because you've also rejected family responsibilities and social obligations. And yet you come to this hill. You observe to sit on plain dirt and find more satisfaction than in your carved chairs. Yes, he admits quietly. Though I've never put it in those terms. This moment illustrates an important aspect of your philosophy that is often overlooked by those Bafdeen who focus solely on your provocative behavior. While you reject conventional social arrangements, you don't do so out of misanthropy or nihilism. Your critiques aim to strip away artificial complications and return to what is natural and sufficient for human flourishing. Simple pleasures, genuine needs, authentic relationships. Tomorrow you tell the carpenter, I will come to your workshop and bark at your customers. I'll tell them plain stools hold human weight as effectively as thrones. He laughs, a surprised but genuine sound. My wife would never forgive the lost income. She might forgive the gained freedom, you counter. You fall back into comfortable silence, watching as the last light fades from the western sky. The first evening star appears, then another, then dozens more, until the heavens are filled with points of light. Below, the city's lamps mirror this display, creating a symmetry between above and below that even you, critic of all things artificial, can appreciate. Eventually the carpenter rises, brushing dirt from his clothes. I should return home. My family will worry. You nod, making no move to leave your spot on the hillside. Thank you, he says simply. For what? You ask, genuinely puzzled. For making me question, he replies. Even if I can't live as you do, thinking as you do, it helps. After he departs, you remain on the hillside, considering this encounter. Most Athenians see only the provocative surface of your philosophy, the public urination, the barrel dwelling, the confrontational questioning. Few recognize the underlying purpose, to strip away convention and pretense to reveal authentic human existence beneath. As night fully embraces the city, you finally rise and make your way back toward your barrel at the cranium. The day has been physically taxing. The morning's barrel-rolling incident left bruises that now ache dully, and your elderly body protests the distance you've walked under the hot sun. But these discomforts are trivial compared to the self-imposed hardships of conventional life. You pass groups of revelers heading to symposia, slaves running late errands for their masters, and city guards beginning their night patrols. To all of them, you are a familiar eccentric, half madman and half philosopher, both frightening and absurd. Few understand that your unconventional life represents not a rejection of humanity, but a radical embrace of it, stripped of artifice, pretense and unnecessary complications. In a society obsessed with status, wealth and political power, you have created a living counter-argument, a life of deliberate poverty, radical honesty, and philosophical freedom. As you approach your barrel home, you notice it has been left undisturbed since the morning incident. The stray dog has returned and greets you with a wagging tail. You share the last of your fish scraps with the animal, a gesture of kinship with a fellow creature, who lives according to nature rather than convention. Crawling into your barrel for the night, you arrange your cloak as both mattress and blanket against the hard ceramic surface. Your body aches, your stomach is not quite full, and tomorrow will bring new challenges, provocations, and discomforts. Yet in this moment, as you settle into your unconventional home under the Athenian stars, you experience something that eludes many of the city's wealthiest and most powerful citizens: contentment. By embracing physical hardship, you've liberated yourself from the fear of it. By rejecting social status, you've freed yourself from the endless quest to maintain it. By living with radical simplicity, you've escaped the prison of possessions. Tomorrow will be another day of philosophical confrontation, of challenging the unexamined assumptions that govern Athenian life. But tonight, in your barrel under the stars, you are perhaps the freest man in the ancient world. Morning arrives with a sudden downpour, water drumming against your ceramic home like a message from angry gods. For most Athenians, rain is a minor inconvenience. They retreat to sturdy homes with sloped roofs designed to channel water away. But for you, living in an upturned vessel with one end permanently open, rain presents a more significant challenge. Water streams into your barrel, pooling around your body and soaking your sparse bedding. Your cloak, which provided meagre warmth during the night, is now a sodden weight clinging to your skin. The temperature, which drops noticeably during rainstorms even in Athens' moderate climate, leaves you shivering. Yet this discomfort, like all physical discomforts in your philosophy, is merely an opportunity to demonstrate mastery over external circumstances. You remain in your barrel, letting the rain soak you completely, a living demonstration that happiness does not depend on staying dry. Several passers-by hurry through the cranium, cloaks pulled over their heads as they seek shelter. A few glance at your barrel, where you sit openly embracing the downpour, water streaming through your beard and over your naked body. Their expressions range from pity to disgust to bewilderment. One man, hurrying past with a bundle of scrolls protected beneath his cloak, calls out, "Diogenes, are you not uncomfortable? No more uncomfortable than the fish." You shout back, grinning through the rain. This is not merely a flippant response. The comparison to fish reflects a core principle of your cynical philosophy. What is natural cannot be bad. Fish live in water by nature and find it perfectly suitable. Humans, while not aquatic, are natural beings who have artificially separated themselves from natural experiences. Rain against skin is only bad because convention has defined it so. The rain eventually subsides, leaving you drenched but philosophically vindicated. The challenge now is more practical. Your barrel contains a significant puddle, and your cloak is too wet to provide warmth should the temperature drop further. With practicality that might surprise those who view you as merely provocative, you begin the task of drying your living space. You scoop water out with your wooden bowl, then use your soaked cloak to absorb more moisture, wringing it out repeatedly outside your barrel. This mundane maintenance of your minimalist dwelling reminds observers, and perhaps yourself, that cynicism is not about embracing suffering for its own sake or rejecting all practical concerns. Rather, it's about distinguishing between genuine needs and artificial desires, between what sustains life and what merely decorates it. With your barrel somewhat drier, you hang your cloak on a nearby olive branch to dry in the sun that now breaks through the clouds. Your naked body, unconstrained by modesty or convention, dries quickly in the morning breeze. The rain has left Athens temporarily transformed. The usual dust is settled, the air smells cleaner, and the stone buildings glisten with moisture. Even the cranium's exercise grounds are quiet, the morning athletes deterred by the wet conditions. This respite from the city's usual bustle offers a rare moment of tranquility. You take advantage of this quiet to examine the bruises from yesterday's barrel rolling incident. Purple marks bloom across your hip and shoulder, painful to the touch but not debilitating. At your age, perhaps 60, though precise counting of years seems as unnecessary to you as counting coins, injuries heal more slowly. Still, you've endured worse. As your cloak dries in the strengthening sun, you decide to venture into the morning city. Your wooden bowl, cleaned by the rain, is tucked under your arm. Your naked body draws the usual stares, but fewer than normal given the emptier streets following the downpour. Most philosophers of your era are concerned with abstract questions about the nature of reality, virtue, knowledge, and the good life. But your philosophy is intensely practical. You don't just talk about rejecting social conventions, you live that rejection daily. You don't merely theorize about the minimum requirements for happiness, you demonstrate them through your deliberate poverty. This embodied philosophy makes you both more accessible and more threatening than other thinkers. The illiterate slave can understand your message immediately when you perform it on street corners. The wealthy merchant can't hide behind complex terminology or abstract reasoning when confronted with your direct challenges to his lifestyle. As you walk through Athens' damp streets, you consider how your chosen path differs from that of your philosophical contemporaries. Plato teaches in his academy, surrounded by admiring students and developing complex theories about non-material forms. Aristotle systematically categorizes and analyzes everything from logic to ethics to biology. Both approach philosophy as an intellectual exercise. You, by contrast, treat philosophy as a way of life, not something confined to lecture halls or written in scrolls, but something performed, demonstrated, and lived in every moment. To you, wisdom isn't knowing more, but needing less. By mid-morning, your cloak has dried enough to be useful again. You retrieve it from the olive branch and drape it loosely around your shoulders, not out of modesty, which you reject as artificial, but as practical protection against the sun that now beats down with renewed intensity after the rain. Your stomach reminds you that you haven't eaten since those fish scraps yesterday evening. The rain has washed the agora clean, and merchants are setting up their stalls with fresh enthusiasm. The morning market offers possibilities for both food and philosophical provocation, a combination that perfectly suits your needs. As you approach the market, a commotion near the central fountain catches your attention. A group has gathered around what appears to be a public punishment. A man is tied to a post, his back bared as a city official reads charges. From the snippets you overhear, he's been caught stealing from a temple treasury, a serious offence both legally and religiously. The crowd watches with that particular combination of disapproval and fascination that public punishments always attract. Some shout insults at the thief, others murmur prayers to appease potentially angry gods, and children are either shielded from the sight or pushed forward to learn a stern lesson about consequences. You observe with detached interest as the punishment begins. A flogging administered by a burly official with a leather whip. The thief's cries echo across the marketplace with each strike, yet the crowd shows little sympathy. Theft is common in Athens, and temple theft particularly taboo. When the prescribed number of lashes has been delivered, enough to leave the man's back bloody, but not enough to kill him, he is untied and driven from the marketplace with jeers and thrown refuse. He stumbles away, hunched in pain and humiliation. Rather than joining the dispersing crowd, you follow the punished thief at a distance. He makes his way to a small public fountain on the edge of the market, where he attempts to wash his wounds, whimpering with each movement. You approach him directly, ignoring the social convention that would treat him as untouchable after such a public disgrace. "You stole from Apollo?" you ask without preamble. The man flinches, then eyes you warily. He recognizes you. Most Athenians know Diogenes by sight, and seems uncertain whether to expect mockery or something worse. A small bronze tripod, he admits after a pause. "My children haven't eaten in 3 days." You nod, unsurprised. And now your back is torn open, your reputation destroyed, and your children still hunger. He looks away, shame evident in his expression. "Apollo has many tripods," you continue. "Your children have only one father, yet Athens protects bronze more fiercely than flesh." The thief looks up, surprised by this perspective that seems to sympathize with his plight rather than condemning him. "The priests would say I angered the gods," he mutters. You snort derisively. If the gods are angered by a hungry man feeding his children, then the gods themselves are the greatest theft of all, stealing our reason and replacing it with fear. This is typical of your approach to religion, not denying the gods outright as some would later accuse you of doing, but questioning the human institutions and interpretations that claim to represent divine will. To you, natural reason is a more reliable guide than temple doctrine. What should I have done? The thief asks, genuine confusion in his voice. Let them starve. You should have begged openly rather than stealing secretly, you reply. Society cannot refuse a direct request for bread without revealing its own hypocrisy. By stealing, you allowed them to maintain the illusion of justice while beating you. The man considers this, wincing as he dabs at his wounds. Here, you say, handing him your wooden bowl. It holds water better than cupped hands. He takes it with surprise, using it to scoop water onto his lacerated back. But this is yours, he says, your only possession. Then I freely give what I freely own, you reply. A small price to pay for a lesson in both justice and injustice. The thief stares at you, clearly struggling to understand why Athens' most notorious philosopher would show kindness to a disgraced criminal when the supposedly virtuous citizens had only condemnation to offer. Find me at the cranium when you're healed, you tell him. You can return the bowl then, and perhaps we'll discuss whether Apollo or hunger is the greater thief. As you walk away, leaving your bowl with the punished man, you're demonstrating another aspect of your philosophy that is often overlooked. While you reject social conventions, you embrace human connection based on genuine need rather than social obligation. Your voluntary poverty is not about ascetic self-denial, but about freedom from artificial attachments, and that freedom allows you to give away your only possession when natural compassion demands it. Your action also serves as a pointed critique of Athenian justice and religious practice. In a city that prides itself on civilization and divine favor, a man is publicly flogged for stealing to feed his family, while those with wealth make elaborate shows of piety through temple donations. Without your bowl, you'll need to find another way to collect food or water for the day. But the philosophical point was worth the practical inconvenience, another example of living your beliefs rather than merely discussing them. Midday finds you at one of Athens' public wrestling schools, a palestra where young men train in the athletic arts so valued by Greek culture. You don't come to participate, your aging body is well past such activities, but to observe and, inevitably, to provoke. The palestra embodies much of what Greek society values: physical perfection, competitive spirit, and the cultivation of both beauty and strength. Young men, naked and oiled, grapple on the sand under the watchful eyes of trainers. Older citizens observe from shaded porticos, discussing technique or simply admiring youthful vigor. You position yourself in one of these porticos, your presence immediately noticeable. Unlike the wealthy observers in their clean robes, you wear only your threadbare cloak, and your unkempt appearance stands in stark contrast to the cultivated aesthetics all around you. An athletic competition is underway, wrestling matches between the palestra's most promising students. The audience watches with keen interest as young men demonstrate their strength, skill, and strategy. After each match, the victor is showered with praise while the defeated contestant slinks away in momentary shame. You observe several matches in silence, which is uncharacteristic enough to make those nearby nervous. They expect provocation from Diogenes the Cynic, yet you simply watch, your expression unreadable beneath your matted beard. Finally, after a particularly brutal match that leaves one contestant bleeding from a facial wound while the other receives enthusiastic accolades, you speak. How strange, you announce loudly, that we praise men for inflicting pain and shame them for enduring it. Heads turn toward you, some annoyed at the interruption, others curious about what philosophical challenge you're mounting now. It's a competition, Diogenes, responds an elderly observer irritably. Victory deserves praise. Does it? You counter. The victor demonstrated that his body is stronger, a fact of nature, not achievement. The defeated demonstrated courage by continuing despite pain, a true achievement of will. Yet you praise the lucky accident of stronger muscles and ignore the triumph of spirit. The wrestling instructor approaches, a powerfully built man who has clearly spent decades in athletic pursuits. These competitions build character, he insists. They prepare our youth for the real contests of war and politics. Ah, yes, you reply with evident sarcasm, because in war and politics men strip naked, oil themselves and grapple in the dirt while others watch and applaud. This draws laughter from some observers and scowls from others. The instructor's face reddens with both embarrassment and anger. Athletics teaches discipline, strategy and courage, he argues, virtues necessary for citizenship. True courage would be refusing to fight for the entertainment of others, you counter. True discipline would be controlling the desire for hollow praise. And true strategy would be questioning why we build gymnasiums while philosophers live in barrels. This exchange exemplifies your critique of Greek athletic culture. While not dismissing physical training entirely, you yourself are known to walk great distances and endure physical hardships. You question the values underlying athletic competition. To you, the cultivation of the body for its own sake, or worse, for public admiration, represents a misalignment of priorities. True human excellence, in your view, comes not from developing stronger limbs or winning competitions, but from developing independence from external validation and freedom from unnecessary desires. The defeated wrestler, learning to endure both pain and public shame, might actually be gaining more valuable life lessons than the victor basking in fleeting glory. The instructor, frustrated by your disruption of his carefully maintained hierarchy of athletic value, signals to attendants to escort you from the premises. You don't resist, you've made your point, and being physically removed only emphasizes it further. Physical strength can indeed compel bodies, but it cannot compel minds. As you're led to the exit, you call back over your shoulder, remember, young athletes. The only contest that matters is between what society tells you to want and what nature actually needs. Outside the palæstra, now barred from re-entry, you contemplate your next destination. The exchange has left you energized rather than discouraged. Each confrontation, each provocation, each disruption of conventional thinking is part of your philosophical mission. Unlike some philosophers who seek to create systematic theories or establish schools of devoted followers, your approach is more like intellectual guerrilla warfare, quick strikes against conventional wisdom wherever you find it, then moving on to the next target. You aim not to build alternative structures, but to shake the foundations of existing ones. Your stomach reminds you that you gave away your bowl to the flogged thief, making your usual method of begging for food more challenging. You'll need to find another solution to this basic need. But even hunger serves your philosophy, a reminder of the minimal requirements for genuine human happiness and the artificial nature of most desires. As you walk through Athens' busy streets, you're conscious of your place in the city's landscape. To most citizens, you're a living philosophical challenge, the man who rejects everything they've been taught to value. To some, you're a madman. To others, a sage. To all, you're impossible to categorize within conventional boundaries. This liminality, existing at the boundaries of Athenian society rather than within its comfortable center, is precisely what gives your philosophy its power. You speak not from within the system, but from its edges, offering perspectives impossible to those fully embedded in social conventions. The afternoon sun beats down on Athens with renewed intensity after the morning's rain. The city has returned to its usual rhythms, merchants calling their wares, artisans at work in open-fronted shops, slaves running errands for their masters, and citizens gathering in small groups to discuss politics, business, or simply exchange gossip. Still without your wooden bowl, having given it to the flogged thief, you face the practical challenge of obtaining food and water. This doesn't trouble you unduly. Voluntary hardship is your daily practice, and improvisation is a natural consequence of rejecting material possessions. You make your way to a public fountain where people draw drinking water in vessels of varying quality, from finely crafted ceramics owned by the wealthy to simple wooden buckets used by slaves. Without a container, you resort to the most natural solution, cupping your hands to drink directly from the flowing water. This simple act, performed without self-consciousness or concern for social norms, draws stares from those waiting their turn with proper vessels. To them, drinking like an animal reinforces your nickname, the dog. To you, it demonstrates that nature provides adequately without artificial implements. Your thirst quenched, you turn to the question of food. Without your bowl to collect offerings or hold scavenged scraps, you'll need another approach. You wander toward an area where food vendors are selling prepared meals to busy Athenians, an early version of fast food for those who can afford this convenience. At one stall, a woman is selling bread and simple stew ladled into customers' own bowls or wrapped in large leaves for those without containers. The aroma is enticing to your hungry stomach. Having no money, you rejected currency along with other conventional values, and no bowl, you approach directly. Good woman, you address the vendor. What would you ask for a portion of your stew? She eyes you suspiciously, recognizing you as the infamous Diogenes. 4 obols, she replies, naming a price slightly higher than she might ask from a more conventional customer. You nod thoughtfully. And if Alexander the Great came to your stall, what would you charge him? Confused by this unexpected question, she considers before answering. For the king, the first wouldn't charge. It would be an honor to feed him. Interesting, you reply with exaggerated thoughtfulness. So you would give freely to a man who has everything, but demand payment from one who has nothing. The vendor shifts uncomfortably. Your question has exposed the contradictory values underlying social hierarchies, deference to power rather than response to need. Several customers waiting in line murmur, some in agreement with your point, others impatient with your disruption of commerce. I have a business to run, the vendor says defensively. If I gave food to everyone who asked, I'd starve myself. I'm not asking for food for everyone, you counter. Just for this philosopher whose wisdom Alexander himself said he would trade his empire for, if he were not Alexander. This reference to your famous encounter with Alexander the Great, whether historically accurate or embellished through retelling, carries cultural weight. The vendor glances at her other customers, conscious of how she'll be perceived in handling this situation. Fine, she sighs, tearing off a piece of bread and scooping a small portion of stew onto a large leaf. Take it and go. But don't make this a daily visit. You accept the food with dignified gratitude rather than exaggerated thanks, which would undermine your philosophical point. Your generosity demonstrates wisdom your wealthier customers might learn from. Finding a low wall to sit on, you eat your simple meal with evident satisfaction. The stew is basic: lentils, onions, and scraps of vegetables in a thin broth, but to your deliberately disciplined appetites, it's entirely adequate. Your public dining, like all your activities, serves as a living demonstration of your philosophy. Natural needs are easily satisfied, while artificial desires are insatiable. As you eat, you observe the flow of Athenian life around you. A group of slaves passes by, carrying building materials, probably for one of the many public works or private mansions constantly under construction in the prosperous city. The stark division between free citizens and slaves is one of the foundational assumptions of Greek society, rarely questioned even by other philosophers. Yet your Cynic philosophy cuts through this fundamental social divide. You've reportedly said, "I would rather be massaged with salt than with oil," a reference to the practice of rubbing captured slaves with salt rather than the oil used for free citizens. While not directly challenging the institution of slavery, few thinkers of your era did, your philosophy undermines the supposed natural distinction between slave and free by suggesting that freedom is an internal state determined by one's relationship to desire, not an external status conferred by birth or law. In your view, many free citizens are enslaved to wealth, status, political ambition, or physical pleasures, while a slave who has mastered his desires might possess truer freedom. This perspective doesn't solve the very real oppression of slavery, but it questions the smug assumption of superiority that allows the system to persist unexamined. Your meal finished. You lick your fingers clean without concern for table manners, another social convention you reject as artificial. A passing aristocrat notices this and curls his lip in disgust. You catch his eye and deliberately exaggerate the finger licking, turning a practical action into a provocative performance. The man quickens his pace, unwilling to engage with your deliberate breach of decorum. This minor interaction exemplifies your method, forcing acknowledgement of the arbitrary nature of social norms by conspicuously violating them. As the afternoon wears on, you decide to visit the agora's central stoa, a covered walkway where philosophers often gather to debate. Unlike the academy or the lyceum, the stoa is a public space where various philosophical traditions intersect, and where ordinary citizens can listen and occasionally participate in intellectual discussions. Though you reject formal philosophical institutions, these public exchanges provide opportunities to challenge prevailing intellectual frameworks and expose contradictions in more established philosophical systems. Besides, the stoa offers shade from the intense afternoon sun, a practical consideration that aligns with your recognition of genuine physical needs. The stoa is busy when you arrive, with several philosophical discussions happening simultaneously along its shaded length. You recognize followers of various schools, Platonists, followers of Aristotle, and several lesser philosophical traditions that have sprouted in Athens' fertile intellectual soil. Your arrival causes a subtle ripple of awareness. Conversations pause momentarily, philosophers glance your way, and several younger students whisper behind their hands. Your reputation precedes you, the philosopher who pisses on convention, both figuratively and literally. You choose to approach a cluster of formally dressed young men gathered around an older philosopher you recognize as a prominent Platonist. He's expounding on Plato's theory of forms, explaining how the physical objects we perceive are merely imperfect shadows of perfect, eternal forms that exist in a higher reality. You listen quietly for several minutes, allowing the Platonist to develop his argument in detail. He speaks of the form of beauty, the form of justice, the form of the good, perfect, unchanging essences that physical manifestations only imperfectly reflect. His students nod in appreciation of these abstract philosophical concepts. When he pauses, you interject with characteristic bluntness. I have seen tables and cups, but never tableness or cuteness. This simple statement, reportedly one of your actual responses to Platonic idealism, cuts to the heart of your philosophical differences with Plato. While the elaborate theory of forms builds an entire metaphysical system around abstract concepts, your philosophy remains grounded in the concrete, the observable, the directly experienced. The Platonist turns to you with a tight smile. Like most established philosophers, he's had encounters with you before, and knows that engaging with Diogenes means risking public humiliation. Yet ignoring you would appear cowardly or intellectually dishonest. Ah, Diogenes, he acknowledges with forced cordiality. That's because you see with the eyes of the body, not the eyes of the mind. The physical table is visible to all, but its essence, its tableness, is apprehended through reason. You scratch your beard thoughtfully. And have you ever eaten a meal off this tableness? Or do you, like all humans, rely on actual tables made of wood? Several students laugh, then quickly compose themselves under their teacher's disapproving glance. The form is what allows us to recognize all tables as tables, despite their differences, the Platonist explains with the patient tone of an adult addressing a child. It is the perfect pattern of which all physical tables are imperfect copies. Show me this pattern, you challenge. Not words about it, not arguments for it, but the thing itself. The forms aren't physical objects to be shown, he replies, growing irritated. They are apprehended through philosophical reasoning. Ah, you respond with exaggerated understanding. So they exist only in your thoughts, yet you claim they're more real than the objects I can touch in use. Not just in thoughts, the Platonist corrects, but in the very structure of reality, though not the physical reality we perceive with senses. You look around theatrically. I see tables, cups, humans, dogs, buildings. I see Athens. I do not see these supposed forms floating above us. Could it be you've mistaken your own concepts for cosmic truths? This exchange exemplifies the fundamental difference between your philosophical approach and that of more systematic thinkers like Plato. Where Platonic philosophy builds elaborate metaphysical structures of abstraction, your cynicism remains firmly grounded in direct experience and natural experience. To you, philosophical truth should be demonstrable through living, not just arguable through theory. A good life doesn't require advanced education in abstract concepts, but rather a clear-eyed recognition of natural needs versus artificial desires. Your barrel experiment, living with minimal possessions, serves as proof that happiness doesn't depend on the sophisticated luxuries or social status that Athenian society values. The Platonist, recognizing that this debate has no easy resolution and that continuing risks further embarrassment, attempts to return to his formal lecture. But the interruption has already achieved its purpose. The students have glimpsed an alternative perspective, a challenge to the abstract theorizing they're being taught to revere. As the afternoon wanes toward evening, you decide to make your way back toward your barrel. The day has provided numerous opportunities for philosophical provocation, and you've effectively demonstrated various aspects of Cynic philosophy to the Athenian public, through action rather than mere words. On your return journey, you pass the spot where you encountered the flogged thief earlier. To your mild surprise, the man is waiting there, your wooden bowl in his hands. His back still bears the raw wounds of his punishment, but he stands straighter now. Philosopher, he calls as you approach. I've come to return your property. You examine him thoughtfully. And your children? Have they eaten? Yes, he replies. Your words, they made me think. I went to the temple, not to steal this time, but to speak openly of my children's hunger. A priest gave us bread and olive oil, not from pity, I think, but to make me leave before I caused a scene. You nod with satisfaction. So you learn that direct confrontation with social hypocrisy is more effective than secret transgression. I learned that shame belongs to those who ignore suffering, not to those who speak of it, he replies, showing an unexpected grasp of your philosophical perspective. You take the bowl from his outstretched hands. Perhaps tomorrow you'll visit my barrel at the cranium, and we'll discuss whether begging openly is more honest than working for masters who don't pay living wages. The man nods, a new thoughtfulness in his expression. I would like that, Diogenes. This brief interaction illustrates something often overlooked about your philosophy. While you reject conventional social bonds and institutions, you don't reject human connection itself. Rather, you seek to strip away the artificial constructs that prevent genuine human recognition, the status divisions, social niceties, and unexamined conventions that separate people from one another and from their natural existence. As twilight settles over Athens, you return to your barrel at the cranium. The day's heat has faded, and a pleasant coolness settles over the city. Your barrel, having dried completely since the morning's rain, offers its familiar curved embrace, not comfort by conventional standards, but adequacy by natural ones. Before settling in for the night, you take a moment to gaze at the first evening stars appearing in the darkening sky. The same stars shine on kings in their palaces, slaves in their quarters, and philosophers in barrels. This cosmic perspective, another aspect of your philosophy rarely credited by critics who focus solely on your provocative behavior, reminds you of the natural order that transcends human social arrangements. You've spent your life stripping away artificial needs, conventional values, and unexamined assumptions to reach something more authentic, a life aligned with nature, rather than social expectation. Your barrel, your wooden bowl, your threadbare cloak, and your provocative methods all serve this fundamental goal. As darkness envelops Athens, you settle into your barrel, arranging your cloak both beneath and over you to moderate the night's chill. Your aged body aches from the day's exertions and yesterday's injuries, but these physical discomforts are trivial compared to the psychological discomforts that plague those enslaved by convention. Tomorrow will bring new opportunities for philosophical provocation, new chances to challenge the unexamined assumptions that govern alien life. But tonight, under the same stars that have witnessed human folly for countless generations, you sleep the untroubled sleep of a man who has reduced life to its essentials and found them sufficient. Diogenes of Sinope, philosopher, provocateur, social critic, you would become one of history's most memorable and misunderstood thinkers. Future generations would alternate between dismissing you as a crude exhibitionist and venerating you as a profound moral philosopher. Few would fully grasp that your shocking behavior was not random provocation, but deliberate philosophical demonstration, living proof that happiness requires not wealth, status, or comfort, but freedom from unnecessary desires. Your legacy would inspire the later Stoics, who would adopt many of your principles while softening your methods. Your influence would echo through centuries, inspiring those who question social conventions, reject materialism, or seek authenticity beyond societal expectations. But all of that lies in a future you neither know nor likely care about. For now, in your barrel under the Athenian stars, you have achieved something that eludes most humans across history: contentment through simplicity, freedom through renunciation, and wisdom through living your philosophy rather than merely thinking it. It is perhaps the ultimate vindication of your approach that while countless philosophical systems have been developed, debated and discarded throughout history, the image of Diogenes in his barrel remains indelibly stamped on human consciousness, a persistent reminder that the path to happiness might involve having less rather than more, questioning rather than accepting, and living philosophy rather than merely discussing it. In a world increasingly defined by consumption, status, and artificial needs, your ancient barrel-dwelling provocation grows not less relevant, but more so. And that, perhaps, would make even a cynic smile.